To act as if you've already been chosen is to bypass the illusion of time. You do not become chosen in the future, you remember that you already are. This act of remembrance is not based on merit or achievement, it is rooted in consciousness. What you believe yourself to be is exactly what you express, and what you express, consciously or unconsciously, is the world you walk through. When you begin with the inner statement, I am chosen, you are not affirming something to become true. You are returning to the state where it has always been true. The reason this feels unfamiliar is not because it is false, but because the noise of doubt has clouded the signal of truth. The inner self knows. The outer self needs only to catch up. And so the secret is not to chase the world's validation, but to occupy the internal conviction of having already been validated by the source of all being. This act must become natural. You cannot pretend to be chosen. Pretending involves effort, and the chosen one does not strive. The chosen one lives. The chosen one walks through life as if the path has already been cleared, as if the role is already cast, as if every door is already open behind the curtain of the invisible. That feeling, that tone, that posture is what creates. The process begins with a single shift. Feeling. Not words, not thoughts, but the actual emotional resonance of already being it. Stand still in a quiet room, close your eyes, and dare to feel what it would be like if you knew beyond question that your name had already been called, not metaphorically, literally. You had been selected, appointed, lifted, chosen. How would you carry yourself? What would you say? How would you respond to delay? How would you speak to yourself in silence? When you feel that inner transformation, no outer condition can argue with it. You no longer wait for signs. You become the sign. And this becoming is not theatrical. It is internal, silent, and powerful. It begins to pull people, moments, and events into alignment with that state. Not because you forced it, but because all things must follow consciousness. They have no choice. They are effects of a singular cause, and that cause is the assumption you carry as real. Most live in the waiting room of life. They wait for success to call, love to arrive, approval to be granted. But the chosen do not wait, they remember. And in remembering, they bypass the delay. They live in the end of the desire. They don't speak of becoming, they speak from the state of having already become. When they say, I am, it is final. It is law. And law does not ask for permission, it simply is. This is why imagination is sacred, because through it you perform the great act of embodiment. You move not your body, but your identity. And identity is what determines all. You could walk into a palace in rags, and if your imagination wears the crown, reality will find a way to clothe you to match it. Not instantly, perhaps, but inevitably. The visible must answer to the invisible. When you first declare, I am chosen, your outer world may rebel. It may test you, challenge you, not because the state is wrong, but because all previous states must dissolve. The pressure is not punishment. It is the collapsing of the old self. Stand firm. Persist in the state, even if nothing around you reflects it. Especially then, for that is the moment you prove the power lies within. You are not conforming to circumstances, you are conforming them to you. In every interaction, carry the inner awareness that you are the one who was selected. Even if the world says otherwise, you do not adjust. You do not explain. You do not apologize for your inner knowing. The chosen one does not need consensus. Consciousness is not democratic. It creates from conviction, not negotiation. And yet, this is not a path of ego, it is a path of surrender. You are not inflating the self, you are aligning it. Aligning it with a truth deeper than logic, older than memory, stronger than effort. That truth is, You are already what you seek to become. You are already loved, already seen, already claimed. When you act from that space, you cease striving. You begin unfolding. This unfolding is not passive. It is creative. Every scene in your day becomes a rehearsal for the new state. When you walk into your job, walk as the chosen one. When you speak to your reflection, speak as the chosen one. When you lay your head to rest, feel the peace of the chosen one. In doing so, you do not wait for change, you generate it. This state must become your dwelling place, not a visit, not a moment of motivation, but a permanent home. The feeling of I am chosen must sit at the core of every breath, even when things go wrong, even when you are misunderstood, even when the world tries to measure you by its metrics. You return again and again to the stillness where the declaration is made, and you make it again. I am chosen. The world you see is nothing but a mirror. If you want it to reflect something new, you must hold up a different image. That image is internal, felt, consistent. And as you continue to carry it, the mirror changes. The people around you shift, the circumstances rearrange, not because you forced anything, but because you finally stopped doubting the one thing that had been true all along. You were never waiting to be chosen. You were waiting to believe you already had been. You must understand that everything responds not to your wish, but to your assumption. The essence of creation lies not in effort, but in acceptance. What you accept as true becomes the seed from which your reality must grow. Wishing is a state of separation. It carries the vibration of lack, the frequency of I don't have it yet. Assumption, however, is union. It claims the end from the beginning. It takes ownership before any external proof exists. It is the unseen cause of all seen events. When you act from assumption, you are not pretending. You are not hoping. You are entering into the state that would naturally express if the desire were already fulfilled. This entrance is not physical, it is psychological. You cross into a new dimension, not with your feet, but with your mind. The moment you assume the state of being chosen, reality begins to reconfigure itself to match that state. There is no delay except a delay in your belief. The chosen version of you already exists. It is not something you must build, earn, or qualify for. It is already complete within the infinite field of imagination. Your role is to identify with it, and the only way to identify with it is to accept its truth without questioning how it will unfold. The how belongs to the bridge of incidence. That bridge will appear when the inner state becomes dominant, but most people reverse the process. They wait for the bridge to prove the assumption, and in waiting they never cross. Imagination is not a game, it is the workshop of your destiny. Every scene you rehearse in the quiet chambers of thought is a script being written for future experience. If you repeat the scene of being overlooked, you will walk into that scene externally. If you dwell in the state of being chosen, you will magnetize the exact people, places, and opportunities that match that identity. You are not just reacting to the world, you are constructing it. The only question is whether you are doing so consciously or by default. This is why deliberate assumption is so powerful. When you assume the feeling of being chosen, you no longer look to the outer world for permission. You walk through the day as though your role has already been confirmed. You no longer feel the need to compete, compare, or justify your worth. You speak differently, you move differently, you think differently. And this shift in consciousness radiates out like a signal. It calls forth the matching responses like a note vibrating through the fabric of space. This is not about arrogance or performance. It is about alignment. You align yourself with the version of reality that already contains the thing you desire, and you stay there, not for a moment, but as a way of being. You persist in that state until the world mirrors it back. Persistence is not struggle. It is silent loyalty to the unseen truth. When you are loyal to the assumption of being chosen, the world has no choice but to yield. Many fail to manifest what they want because they visit the state rather than dwell in it. They touch it in meditation or visualization, but return quickly to doubt when the senses contradict it. But the senses are always late. They only report what has been assumed consistently. If you want to change the report, you must change the assumption and hold it long enough for the report to catch up. Reality is not quick to rebel, but it is absolutely obedient. It may take time to move the outer pieces, but they will move when the inner shift is complete. Do not concern yourself with appearances. Appearances are shadows, reflections of old states. When you look at them with fear or frustration, you give them life. But when you look beyond them, when you refuse to be persuaded by what your eyes show, you step into the authority of the chosen one. You say inwardly, that may have been true once, but I no longer occupy that place. And with that declaration, the world begins to soften and mold to your new shape. To assume is to declare silently, it is so. Even when nothing agrees, even when no evidence exists, you stand firm in the internal truth. This firmness is not loud, it is deep, it is still. It is the stillness of knowing, not needing. And from that stillness, the most impossible things unfold with ease. Because what was once impossible becomes inevitable the moment it is accepted as real within. You do not need to convince anyone of your assumption. The chosen self needs no audience. It does not broadcast itself with desperation. It carries a quiet power, an inner poise. That poise speaks louder than any words. Others feel it. Circumstances feel it. Life itself bends to it. Why? Because assumption is the language of the universe. It is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Each time you assume the chosen state, you are stepping onto a timeline that already contains your desire. That timeline exists now. It is not waiting to be created. It is waiting to be entered. You enter it through imagination, through emotion, through the full sensory experience of already being there. The more vividly you live from that place, the faster you materialize it here. But be warned, doubt is the silent thief. It does not shout, it whispers, it asks, what if this isn't true? And in that question, it invites you back to the state of lack. Do not answer it. Do not entertain it. Return again to the feeling. Return to the assumption. Live there, sleep there, speak from there. And you will see how quickly the world forgets who you were and begins to treat you as who you've become. What you entertain in imagination becomes the instruction for your world. It is not merely a possibility, it is a law, as precise as gravity. The moment you dwell on an inner image, whether joyful or fearful, you give it permission to manifest. Your mind is not a passive observer, but a projector. Every image impressed upon it is etched into the script of your experience. The world responds to this internal film, not to your intentions, nor to your words spoken in contradiction to it. You live not from what you say you believe, but from what you inwardly accept as already true. This is why acting as though you've already been chosen begins with mental imagery. If you desire to be seen, recognized, and loved, you must not only speak it, you must see it, but more than that, you must feel it. A scene imagined without emotion is a shadow without substance. It holds no creative power. But when you infuse it with feeling, when the moment imagined feels as real as touching the table before you, it begins to move the machinery of reality. That inner scene becomes the blueprint, and reality, like the faithful builder, follows it without resistance. To live in imagination is not to escape the world, it is to direct it. The world is not fixed. It is fluid, moldable, shaped moment by your persistent assumptions. If your inner world is filled with the idea that you have already been chosen, then every part of life must rise to meet that claim. People, events, and so-called coincidences will gather like actors responding to a new script. They play their roles not because you instructed them directly, but because your inner state invited the performance. The great misunderstanding is that imagination is separate from reality, that the unseen is less real than the visible. But the opposite is true. The seen is temporary. It is the echo, the unseen, your thoughts, your assumptions, your inner conversations, is the cause. It is the fountain from which every form arises. When you change the cause, the effect must change, though it may require time to rearrange. This is why one must be deliberate. The imagination is always active, always creating, but most allow it to drift toward worry, fear, and limitation. They rehearse worst-case scenarios and wonder why the future feels bleak. What is repeated in the mind eventually becomes familiar, and what is familiar feels real, even if it is false. So instead of letting imagination serve fear, you must turn its power toward truth. You must live mentally in the experience of already being who you wish to be. Take time daily, especially before sleep, to build and occupy the chosen state. Let it not be mechanical, but alive. Visualize scenes that imply you are already favored, already acknowledged, already walking in the outcome you once pursued. Do not merely watch yourself in this vision. Enter into it. Feel the tone of voice others use when they speak your name with admiration. Hear the applause, smell the environment, feel the clothing on your body, the ease in your breath. These details matter. They are the substance of the state. And once the scene feels natural, release it. Carry the residue of that feeling into your waking life. Let it govern how you carry yourself, how you respond, how you move. This is not delusion. This is creation. You are not faking a reality, you are authoring one. When doubts come, as they surely will, do not argue with them. Simply return to the image. Return to the felt reality of being chosen. Doubt loses its power not through logic, but through replacement. The human mind cannot hold two dominant states. One will always give way to the other. If you feed the image of fulfillment with repetition and feeling, the image of lack will fade for lack of nourishment. Consistency is the key. You do not need more strength, you need more steadiness. A drop of water falling in the same place over time can carve through stone. Likewise, a single assumption held persistently will dissolve any obstacle. Your job is not to monitor how things are going. Your job is to remain faithful to the state. Let life concern itself with the means. Your part is to dwell mentally in the end. Many look at their current situation and say, but nothing has changed. That is because they are still watching, not assuming. Watching belongs to the senses. Assuming belongs to the spirit. And it is spirit that creates. If you live in imagination long enough, the senses will follow. The world must conform. It has no choice but to reflect the state that dominates. You must be willing to ignore evidence that contradicts your vision. If the scene in your life today seems to argue against a chosen identity, it is simply the residue of old thoughts. Pay it no attention. Let it pass. Keep your gaze inward. Your inner state is not dependent on circumstances. It is the cause of them. That knowing is what sets you apart. That knowing is what allows you to create instead of react. Your imagination is divine. It is not limited by logic, memory, or probability. It moves with the freedom of pure being. And when you live from imagination, you bypass the world's rules. You are no longer bound by what others expect or by what history suggests. You are moved by vision. You are guided by feeling. And what you feel deeply and consistently must become fact. To entertain in imagination, the reality of being chosen is to align yourself with your highest self. It is not fantasy. It is selection. You are selecting the version of you that lives in harmony, success, joy, and power. And the moment that selection is made, everything else becomes rearranged to reflect it. Not all at once, but inevitably. So let every scene in your inner world speak one thing. You are already chosen. Not someday, not if things go well, now. Already, fully, completely. And when that becomes the most dominant truth in your inner world, the outer world will rise and call it true as well. Many wait for external validation before embodying the chosen self. They wait for a word from another, a sign from life, or a confirmation from circumstance before they allow themselves to believe they are worthy. But such a posture is backward. It gives power to effects and denies the cause. To wait for the world to reflect your identity is to remain bound to uncertainty. True transformation begins when you no longer need the evidence to begin believing, but instead make your belief the evidence itself. When you dare to act as if you've already been chosen without needing the world to agree, you step into creative dominion. The outer world cannot leave the inner world. It was never designed to. The outer is the mirror and the inner is the face. The image in the mirror does not change until the face changes. So if you wait for the reflection to shift first, you wait in vain. The world does not validate who you are. It confirms who you have assumed yourself to be. When you understand this, you realize that every appearance of rejection or silence is only a test of the persistence of your inner claim. Do you continue to walk as the chosen one, even when the room does not echo your name? Do you carry the posture, the voice, the stillness of the appointed, even when the applause is absent? The key lies in inward conviction. This conviction is not loud, it is quiet, steady, and immovable. It does not require announcement. It does not seek applause. It is the unshakable knowing that what you declare inwardly must express outwardly in time. And in the space between assumption and manifestation, you do not panic, you do not question, you remain in the state that it is already so. That remaining is faith, not in some external deity, but in the law of consciousness that governs all life. To embody the chosen self means to embody the energy, frequency, and presence of the one who has already received. You do not dress for the waiting room. You dress for the stage. You do not speak like someone hoping to be discovered. You speak as one whose destiny is unfolding. The tone of your voice, the rhythm of your walk, the serenity of your gaze, all these things become sermons to the subconscious. They tell the unseen forces, this is who I am now. And reality must match that tone. It is not arrogance to hold this inner knowing. It is obedience to the truth that you create from within. Arrogance demands attention. Confidence requires none. It is the silent, sovereign energy of one who remembers. To remember is to reclaim. You reclaim the version of yourself that the world never saw. And the moment you do, the world will begin to reflect it, not because you asked it to, but because you became it. This process requires discipline of thought. You cannot entertain two masters, doubt and certainty, and expect the world to reflect the latter. If you say, I am chosen, but continue to think and act like one who is overlooked, the contradiction weakens the signal. Your reality becomes static, unclear, conflicted. But when every thought, every movement, every word begins to align with the state of being chosen, the message becomes pure, and pure signals produce precise results. Do not underestimate the power of subtle shifts. To rise each morning and say inwardly, today I walk as one who is chosen, is not small. It is a reprogramming of identity. It is the redirection of energy from doubt to destiny. And as you do this day after day, your nervous system changes. Your habits change. Your responses change. What once triggered fear now meets your calm. What once evoked anxiety now meets your smile. Not because circumstances have changed, but because you have changed. And because you have changed, circumstances must respond. This is why embodiment is more powerful than affirmation alone. Affirmations spoken without embodiment are noise. They are hollow. They do not convince the subconscious. But when you embody the truth that you are chosen, the affirmation becomes unnecessary. Your being speaks louder than words. You walk into spaces and things open, not because of anything external, but because the internal has shifted so fully that resistance can no longer hold. Some will not recognize you when you begin to live this way. They will ask who you think you are. That question is not meant to stop you. It is meant to reveal how deeply you believe. You do not need to argue. You do not need to prove. You simply remain in your state. The world around you is not your enemy. It is your echo. Let it reflect what you now choose to be. The most sacred moment in this process is when you realize you no longer seek approval. You no longer hunger for validation. You no longer feel the urgency to be noticed. You are no longer asking, will they see me? Instead, your energy declares, I see myself. And because you do, the world has no choice but to catch up. That is the secret. When the inner eye opens, the outer world must reflect it. Live not as one waiting to be chosen. Live as one who remembers they already are. The inner scene where you are acknowledged, celebrated, and accepted must become so vivid that it overshadows the outer silence. And in time, the silence will break, the room will shift, the light will change, and what you assumed so faithfully in private will become undeniable in public. There is no value in rehearsing the role of the rejected, the overlooked, or the almost ready. These are merely garments woven from memory and sustained by fear. They are not your true identity. They are costumes worn for a season, but many have made them permanent by forgetting they can change. You were not born to live in a state of waiting. You were not formed in the image of almost. You were shaped by the substance of I am, and that substance recognizes no partial truths. When you act from the chosen self, you disrobe from old patterns, you step out of inherited thinking, you walk away from roles others assign to you, and step fully into the one you were always meant to play. The truth is this: your rejection is only as real as your reaction to it. What appears as being overlooked is often life making space for the higher version of you to emerge. But most interpret that space as absence. They say, no one sees me, not realizing that the world cannot see what you have not yet claimed within. When you wear the inner cloak of the chosen self, invisibility becomes impossible. The light you emit from within compels others to acknowledge you, even if they do not understand why. It is not about being loud or visible in the physical sense. It is about being undeniable in the spiritual. The idea of being almost ready is one of the most seductive lies. It tells you that your worth is just around the corner, that if you do a little more, prove a little harder, or wait a little longer, then you will finally qualify. But this mindset delays manifestation indefinitely. It tricks the conscious mind into permanent preparation. And what you prepare for, you never receive. The chosen self does not prepare. It performs, it acts, it moves. In the certainty that readiness is not something to achieve, it is something to assume. Memory often argues against this truth. It whispers, but remember what they said, or remember how they left. Memory is not the truth of your identity. It is the record of past assumptions. If you once lived in a state of being unwanted, the world matched that state faithfully. But that record is not binding unless you keep replaying it. The moment you shift states, the past loses its grip. And the beautiful paradox is that you can revise it, not by changing what happened, but by changing how you relate to it. If an event once told you that you were not chosen, go back in imagination and rewrite it. See the scene play out with you being seen, respected, embraced. Feel the emotion of being accepted in that moment. That revision, though invisible, will ripple forward, and life will follow the newly sown seed. Fear is the shadow that convinces many to stay where they are. It suggests that if you dare to act chosen and are wrong, the disappointment will be too great. But this fear is misplaced. The real disappointment is in never stepping into your own light. The risk is not in imagining too boldly, but in shrinking to fit someone else's story. You are not meant to be an echo, you are meant to be a voice. And that voice only emerges when you no longer carry the weight of the world's opinions as your compass. In fact, chosen is not to fight your way to the top. It is to radiate a sense of wholeness that draws all things to you. It is a quiet force, a magnetic frequency. People may not be able to explain it, but they will respond to it. They will find themselves trusting you, respecting you, listening when you speak, sensing the gravity of your presence. That is not charisma, it is consciousness. You are no longer affirming your identity, you have become it. This process does not require you to erase your past. It only asks that you stop using it as your foundation. The house you are building now must be built upon the assumption that you are already enough, already accepted, already validated by the infinite. When you build from this material, your structure stands in storms. It does not sway when circumstances shake, because your foundation is internal, unshakable, and rooted in truth. Language plays a vital role here. Every time you speak, you affirm a state. Be mindful of the phrases you use. If your speech is filled with uncertainty, comparison, or self-dismissal, then you are strengthening the unwanted state. Change your language, and you begin to change your reality. Speak as though your worth is a settled fact, because it is. The chosen self does not speak to gain favor. It speaks from favor already granted. Thoughts must follow suit. You cannot entertain fantasies of rejection and still expect to be received. Your dominant inner narrative shapes the invitation you extend to the world. When your inner conversation becomes one of power, love, and selection, the world cannot ignore you. This is not mysticism, it is law. The inner state dictates the outer response, and your consistency in that state dictates how quickly it appears. Each moment is a chance to recommit to this truth. When you feel unworthy, remind yourself it is only a feeling, it is not a decree. When you feel forgotten, recall that consciousness never forgets what you vividly assume. When you feel small, remember that scale is determined by awareness. If you rise in awareness, you rise in stature, regardless of how the world measures you. What you are internally becomes your true size. You are not the rejected. You are not the unready. You are not the almost. You are the one who has been chosen from the beginning. And now, finally, you choose yourself. Would you like me to now expand the sixth keynote in the same immersive and educational format? Every night, before sleep, inhabit the chosen state, not as a ritual of repetition, but as a sacred rehearsal of reality. For it is in those final moments before consciousness dissolves into sleep that your assumptions are handed over to the subconscious, and what is accepted as true there becomes the world you will meet tomorrow. Sleep is not an escape, it is a doorway. The images you carry into that doorway pass through the veil and take root in the infinite field from which all things are formed. To sleep in the state of already being chosen is to bypass delay and to anchor yourself to the end. You are not begging the dream to show you signs. You are giving the dream instructions. You are not pleading with the world to remember you. You are informing it of who you are. The moments before sleep are not a time for review of the day's failures. They are not a time to rehearse fear. They are the most potent hour for creation. Use them with reverence. Lie down in your bed and close your eyes. Withdraw from the five senses. Turn inward. And now, bring into the theater of the mind a scene. Not just any scene, but one that would be undeniably true if you were already living as the one who has been chosen. Perhaps it is a conversation with someone congratulating you, or a moment of peace in solitude, where you feel acknowledged without a word. Choose simplicity, but choose power. And above all, choose something that evokes feeling. Feeling is the currency of creation. Without it, the scene is hollow. With it, the scene becomes alive and magnetic. When you feel the reality of being chosen, even though nothing yet shows it on the outside, you are impressing upon the subconscious a command. The subconscious accepts only what is felt to be real. Words are not enough. Logic is not enough. Emotion is the signal it responds to. When that signal is consistent, manifestation becomes inevitable. Do not fall asleep in the state of lack. That is the greatest sabotage of all. To spend your day in desire and then sleep in doubt is to uproot the seed before it takes root. Instead, carry the feeling through the threshold of sleep. Feel the relief of having already arrived. Breathe as if the weight has lifted. Smile gently as if the answer has already been given. These are not theatrics, they are signals. The subconscious interprets them with precision and responds with form. It does not matter what happened during the day. The day is past. The only thing that matters now is the state in which you descend into unconsciousness. That state becomes the dominant vibration of your being. It weaves itself into your dreams, into your thoughts upon waking, and into the subtle decisions you make. And from those decisions, the world takes its shape. If your desire is to be seen, to be valued, to be chosen, then you must live from that place in imagination. Not someday, not in some vague future, but now. Before sleep, rehearse that identity. Let it not feel foreign, let it feel natural. When the scene becomes familiar, when it evokes a gentle knowing, you are ready to let go. You do not need to force it. You simply fall asleep in the feeling of already being who you want to be. Some will say, but it's not real, I'm lying to myself. But what is real? That which the senses report, or that which the soul knows to be true? Reality is not a fixed condition. It is fluid and shaped by awareness. If you continue to reaffirm what is, you will never create what could be. To lie in bed affirming your current limitations is not honesty, it is imprisonment. True honesty is aligning with the greater truth of who you are becoming, not as a wish, but as a decision. You do not need to convince anyone. You do not need to tell others what you're imagining. The work is done in silence. It is done in the stillness of your own room, when the world is quiet and your mind is most receptive. That is when the roots go deep. That is when the foundation is poured. And what you build in that invisible hour will soon rise into visible form. Do not underestimate the simplicity of this practice. The mind craves complexity, but the soul works in simplicity. One scene, one feeling, one silent acceptance. That is all it takes. But it must be repeated night after night, until it becomes more real than the waking world, until the assumption becomes automatic, until you can no longer remember what it felt like to be anything other than chosen. This is not about obsession, it is about absorption. When the feeling absorbs you, it saturates the subconscious, and the subconscious, when saturated, takes action without resistance. It orchestrates the bridge of incidents. It moves people, adjusts timing, inspires you to speak at the right moment, opens doors where there were only walls. All of this happens beyond the reach of the rational mind, but it happens nonetheless, because the unseen is always senior to the seen. There is no limit to what can be done when you master this inner discipline. Your environment may remain unchanged at first. People may still speak to you the same, but something has changed where it matters most, within you. And that change will echo outward. The inner state always impresses itself onto the outer screen. The more vivid, the more consistent, the more faithful you are to the feeling, the more quickly the outer form will catch up. So tonight, as you prepare to rest, do not rehearse the unwanted. Do not replay conversations that wounded you. Do not review outcomes you wish had gone differently. Choose the end you desire and occupy it. Let the chosen self be your final thought. Let it cradle you to sleep. And as you drift, know that you are not alone. You are being heard. You are being answered. And what you claim tonight in imagination will rise tomorrow in substance. Gratitude must follow assumption. You cannot truly be chosen and live in complaint. You cannot hold the state of already having and at the same time speak as if you are still in need. Gratitude is the bridge that carries your assumption from the invisible into form. It is not merely a practice, it is a declaration. When you feel grateful for what has not yet appeared to the senses, you are telling the subconscious that it has already been received. And the subconscious, faithful to what it believes to be real, must externalize it. Most associate gratitude with reacting to something already visible, but true creative gratitude is proactive. It is felt before the event, before the recognition, before the manifestation. It is the emotional signature of faith. When you feel the genuine emotion of thanks for a desire yet unseen, you collapse time, you bring the future into the now, you move the end result from possibility into inevitability. Gratitude is not words, it is feeling. Words may initiate it, but the power lies in the emotion behind them. You may say, "Thank you," 100 times, and yet remain barren if no feeling stirs within. But a single moment of sincere inner thanksgiving carries more power than volumes of repetition. When you say, "Thank you," to the unseen, as if it has already been done, the unseen begins to shape itself to match that faith. Gratitude confirms your assumption. It is the spiritual echo that says, "This is real." You do not need to see the evidence to feel thankful. The chosen do not wait to see before they celebrate. They celebrate to see. Their joy is not caused by facts. It causes the facts. This reversal is the key to creative power. If you wait for something external to justify your joy, you are no longer the creator. You are the effect. But when joy arises from within, regardless of appearances, you are operating from the true center of power. When you rise in the morning, give thanks not for what might happen, but for what already is, what already exists in the unseen realm. The appointment has already been made. The door is already open. The version of you that is recognized, seen, and selected is not an idea. It is a reality. And when you give thanks to it, you draw it nearer. It does not resist your call because you are not begging. It recognizes its own voice in your feeling. Likewise, throughout the day, let your inner state be flavored with silent gratitude, not a performance, but a quiet knowing. When something goes wrong, give thanks, not because you enjoy the problem, but because you know the outcome is already resolved in your favor. When you feel overlooked, pause, breathe, and feel the thanks that only the chosen would feel. That gratitude is a signal to the subconscious that says, "Stay the course, we have already won." There is something sacred about gratitude before proof. It is the posture of faith. It silences fear and dismantles doubt. You cannot feel thankful and fearful at the same time. One must dissolve in the presence of the other. Gratitude then is not just a virtue, it is a technique. It is a state of being that attracts what aligns with its frequency. Life does not give to the needy, it gives to the certain, and certainty speaks through gratitude. Before sleep, as you inhabit the chosen state, let gratitude close the chapter of your day. Say silently, "Thank you for being who I am," not as a hope, but as a recognition. Thank the unseen forces that are moving on your behalf. Thank the version of yourself that has already crossed the finish line. You are not waiting to become. You are remembering what already is. And that remembrance is sealed through thanksgiving. Let gratitude be the default position of your heart. Let it carry you even in difficulty. When resistance comes, do not curse it. Thank it for showing you where old beliefs still linger. When delays appear, do not panic. Thank them for allowing your inner conviction to deepen. Gratitude turns every experience, pleasant or unpleasant, into a stepping stone toward manifestation. It transforms what appears to be lack into abundance, because gratitude declares, there is more than enough. I have all I need. Speak gratitude inwardly, not to impress anyone, but to align yourself. Thank life as if it has already bowed to your request. Thank people inwardly for recognizing you, even before they do. Thank the opportunities you have not yet seen for already belonging to you. This internal atmosphere of thankfulness changes your posture. You walk with ease. You speak with confidence. You move with quiet authority, not because you force the world to notice you, but because you have noticed yourself. Gratitude carries within it the seed of completion. It is not grasping. It is resting. It says, I do not need to chase what is already mine. That rest is powerful. It communicates to the subconscious that no more striving is needed. And when the subconscious accepts this rest, it begins the process of external fulfillment. The bridge of incidents begins to form. The events begin to flow, and you find yourself walking into experiences that mirror your internal thanksgiving. When you live in this state, you no longer wonder if it's working. You no longer ask when it will happen. Those questions fade in the presence of true gratitude. Because true gratitude means you've already decided, you've already received, you've already arrived. The world is simply catching up. To act is not to perform, to act is to embody. When you assume the state of one who has already been chosen, you do not enter a stage, you return home. There is no need to fake what is real. You are not wearing a costume. You are simply allowing the truth to surface. The chosen self is not something you become through effort. It is something you allow through surrender. And that surrender is not weakness. It is alignment with the highest intelligence within you. You do not need to convince the world. You do not need to beg for confirmation. You do not wait for someone to declare your worth. When you assume the state of the chosen one, you quietly withdraw from the game of external validation. You no longer seek, you possess. You no longer try, you are. And in that quiet shift, everything begins to change, not because the world has agreed with you, but because you have agreed with yourself. The outer world is not a creator, it is a reflector. It does not assign roles, it simply echoes back the one you have chosen to play. You may change locations, relationships, or appearances, but unless the state of consciousness changes, the story repeats. When you become the chosen self in imagination, the world rearranges itself around that identity. Not immediately, not forcefully, but inevitably. Creation responds to being, not to desire, not to longing, but to being, and being is claimed through assumption. You assume the position. You walk as if the crown already rests on your head, not to show others, but because you have accepted it for yourself. And that acceptance carries power. Not loud power, quiet power, inner authority. People will feel it before they understand it. Circumstances will shift in your favor, not because you fought for them, but because you became the version of you that was already selected. Your state of being speaks louder than your words. If you say, I am chosen, but carry doubt in your posture, fear in your tone, or hesitation in your energy, the world responds not to your sentence, but to your state. The state is the cause, and the cause must be assumed before the effect is seen. When you become the cause, you no longer live as a reaction to life. You become the origin of experience. This is why identity matters. You do not manifest what you want, you manifest what you are. The moment you embody the state of being chosen, everything begins to conform. The bridge of incidents is built from your assumption. Each event becomes a step. Each encounter becomes a confirmation. Not because you force the path, but because the path must rise to match your state. People will come who recognize you as chosen, not because they discovered something new, but because you revealed what was always hidden. When you stop hiding from your own light, the world has no choice but to respond to its radiance. That is the silent influence of identity. You do not shout it, you do not defend it, you live it, and life bows to those who live from truth. This truth does not need time to become real. It becomes real the moment you accept it. Time is simply the echo. The signal is the assumption. If the assumption is held with faith, time will have no choice but to deliver its result. You may look around and see nothing that reflects your state, but do not be discouraged. That is the test. When nothing agrees, will you remain? When the mirror shows an old image, will you hold the new identity? Those who walk in faith are not controlled by the senses. They understand that the senses are slow. They report what has been, not what is becoming. And what is becoming is born in the unseen. It begins in silence. It begins in imagination. And when it is maintained long enough, it enters visibility. This is why persistence is key. Not effort, not strain, but persistence, steadiness in the state, loyalty to the unseen reality. Each day, you wake up and return to the state. You feel it, you wear it, you speak from it, you walk through life as if nothing is missing, and that inner consistency bends reality. It moves obstacles, it stirs hearts, it rearranges the invisible currents of possibility until the outer world reflects your inner truth. And in that reflection, there is no surprise, only recognition. You will look at the world and say, of course, because you have already lived it within. The moment is not new, it is remembered. And in that remembrance, there is peace. You are not overwhelmed, you are confirmed. There is no higher act than to claim your identity, not in ego, but in awareness. To say inwardly, this is who I am now, is the greatest creative decision you can make. And once that decision is made, you need not explain it to anyone. The world will see it when it appears, but by then, you will already have lived it for so long that it will feel natural. Live not from effort, but from embodiment. The chosen self is not anxious. The chosen self is not trying to become. The chosen self simply is. And when you live from that truth, nothing can resist you, not because you pushed, but because you aligned. And what is aligned with truth must become real. You are not here to seek permission from the world. You are here to declare what is already true within you. The world will never offer what you do not first accept. You do not wait to be chosen, you choose yourself. And in that sacred decision, life follows. The moment you dare to assume the end, the moment you move in silence as one who has already received, the invisible begins to mold the visible. The currents of reality respond to your inner declaration, not your effort, not your noise, not your need, but your assumption. There is no need to prove your worth. The proof is in the feeling. When you feel chosen, when you think from the state rather than toward it, your very being becomes the evidence. Gratitude flows naturally, not as a reaction, but as confirmation. You stop chasing. You stop rehearsing rejection. You stop shrinking to fit someone else's frame. Instead, you stand, even when no one applauds. You speak, even when no one hears. You give thanks, even when nothing seems to arrive. And in that inner posture, you plant the seeds of inevitability. Each night, you descend into sleep, not with doubt, but with identity. You do not beg the future to come. You live from the memory of what is already done. Each thought, each word, each breath becomes part of the garment of the chosen one. It is not a mask. It is not pretend. It is truth revealing itself through you. Others may not understand. That is not your concern. Your task is not to convince, but to remain. Remain in the state, remain in the knowing, remain in the quiet power of the already fulfilled. Because those who remain, who persist without need, without fear, without noise, are the ones the world calls chosen. And when the world does finally respond, when it bends, when it recognizes what you have always known inwardly, you will not be surprised. You will not tremble. You will simply nod in quiet remembrance and say to yourself, this is exactly how it was always meant to be.